Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. I'd like to say thank you to this episode's sponsor, State & Liberty, a performance-focused dress clothing brand for men. We all face the issue of purchasing off-the-shelf dress clothes that seem just to fit loose and uncomfortable. State & Liberty noticed this void by creating clothing that fits your active lifestyle that appears custom-tailored to you at the same time. Make sure to check them out for yourself at stateandliberty.com, where you can find everything from pants, shirts, coats, and even complete suits. That's stateandliberty.com, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by the co-founder of Hydrant, John Sherwin. Studying biological sciences at the University of Oxford, John realized the missing void in a healthy energy and hydration supplement. Listen as we talk about the development of Hydrant, a rapid hydration formula that is mixed with a balance of water, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and zinc to keep you truly hydrated. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by John Sherwin of Hydrant. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Cameron. I'm excited to chat.
Of course. So I want to start out with your upbringing. So where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Wow, that's a very broad question. So I was born in the US, in New York, but I did most of my growing up in a town called Bath in the UK. It's in the Southwest. I have two siblings, and I guess what was my childhood like? It was a lot of fun. If I think back, I'm very close with my siblings. I have an American father and an English mother, so we have, I like to think, a somewhat unique perspective on the world, just like some culturally American parts of us and some culturally British parts. Obviously, I sound largely British. But yeah, I mean, we were super lucky. We had parents who didn't push us super hard on the education front, but for whatever reason, I think all three of us turned out to be kind of workaholic-y. And so we worked hard and did pretty well in school. Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have an entrepreneurship mindset growing up? Did you ever try to make any companies or sell anything as a kid?
As a kid, honestly, no. I'd love to, tell you a story of, having a great lemonade stand, which I feel like is what most entrepreneurs have to tell. But no, I really don't think I did. I think the closest I got to that was my brother and I tried to start a battery recycling program in our village. There was no monetary gain to be had. It was really just to try and help people recycle their batteries. It was very short-lived. It did not go very well. But it was a first taste of putting yourself out there a bit. I think one of the scariest things for entrepreneurs, and this held right the way through to, working on Hydrant from the early days, is you have to sometimes walk into places of business where you are supposed to be the customer and not be a customer. And just like breaking that kind of social construct is a very strange place to be in. So it's definitely a learning experience.
Totally. I saw that you went in 2010 to study at the University of Oxford. What did you study there?
So I studied biological sciences. I should confess, I also applied to colleges in the US, but ended up at Oxford doing biological sciences. The reason the US made a lot of sense for me is the way education works is very broad. So you don't have to specialize typically until a couple of years into your degree. Where in the UK, you apply for one thing and one thing only most of the time. There are a couple of exceptions. So for me, I loved biology. I also loved economics, but I could not see myself doing economics for 3 years. And I figured this is the right time to really indulge my curiosity. And so it was 3 years straight of biology and nothing else.
Gotcha. What was your experience like at Oxford as a university?
Again, I had a lot of fun. I think it is every bit as intense as kind of the reputation would imply. There are different ways of approaching it, but we have these 8-week semesters or trimesters, I suppose. There's 3 of them. They're 8 weeks long, and there's sometimes an extra week added on for exams. And during that 8-week period, you are cramming in all of the studying, all of the testing and exams, and all of the socializing into such a small period of time before everyone leaves the town again. That it is nonstop. And I mean, we'll get into it, but that was really where hydration was one of the things that helped me push through Like week 7 and 8 is it's a marathon by the end of it in terms of like the studying and the social. So that was where I started to notice dehydration as being something that could really be impacting my performance.
Gotcha. So prior to Hydrant, what kind of jobs were you working following college, or even during college if you had some other jobs?
So, I mean, my mom always felt strongly that we, like take jobs from a pretty young age and try out, all sorts of different like service roles. So like I've worked in an ice cream parlor way back when. I have done a bit of volunteering. In college, I did something, fairly atypical. I started I started a small business. It didn't do super well, much like the battery enterprise. Basically, I recognized there was an opportunity in the nightlife space within Oxford to help owners of nightclubs to differentiate between their customers, basically price differentiate between them. Came up with this whole concept. It was called Q Cutter. The idea was you would sell a subscription to students to be able to cut the line to get into the bar. Of course, this was in the UK where the drinking age is 18. So most people, by the time they get to college, are of age to drink. So it might be different for your audience.
Yeah.
So, and that I spoke a bit about going into a place where you're typically a customer and having to be something else. And in order to set that business up, I thought the idea was solid. I was working with a friend on it, and I was the one who was going into the nightclubs themselves during the day, which is a bizarre thing to do. It smells like vomit and cleaning fluid all mixed together. But I would go in there and meet these managers in seedy little rooms off the side of the nightclub, and successfully got 5 of the clubs, which was the main 5 I wanted, to sign up to this program and say, hey, like if someone shows up with this card, we'll let them in. It wasn't like a watertight contract. It was just a sort of handshake. Yep. Okay, cool. So I was pretty excited about that and like the potential extra money it could bring me just to support me through my studies. But of course there was a flaw in the plan, which is the nightlife scene is run by an events company in Oxford. And there's a couple of events companies, but this one in particular was fairly sort of, shall we say, monopolistic. And they did not like that the nightclubs were agreeing to work with anyone but them. So they basically threatened the nightclubs and said, look, if you accept this card on the door, we'll pull our marketing from your events.
Wow.
And just like that, my first venture was over. I mean, it wasn't quite, I tried to partner with the events company just to like get something going.
Yeah.
But it was a really fantastic experience early on. My friends still make fun of me for it. It's kind of like the British way of being friends.
Yeah.
But it was a good learning experience.
That's so fascinating. So how did the event companies find out about that? Did like customers actually start using it and word of mouth, or?
No, it never even got to that. I think the managers of the nightclubs must have said something. So this was the big flaw in my plan, was going straight to the nightclubs. I had assumed wrongly that they were really the sort of anchors of the whole scene at university. But the reality was this one event company would host like a party every single night at a different bar around town. And that was the night when that bar made most of its money. And so if he pulled his support to that nightclub, they would not have that high revenue generating event, and they would lose out as a business. They would basically be sort of off the map.
Gotcha.
So I did not understand who held the leverage in that relationship.
Gotcha. I see that you started Hydrant around 2016. So getting into that, what was the overall inspiration? You said hydration was a big key towards your college years. What inspired you to create and pursue Hydrant?
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 sides to this. There's one is like existing products were not very good, but the other piece is like, what was the problem I was trying to solve? So the problem was really, there were a lot of different pressures on my life through college. I played kind of amateur level sports. I think intramural is probably the word we would use here in the States. So intramural sports, I'm studying hard. I have this intense like 8-week block to get ready for exams. And then I'm also, trying to make friends and going out. And of course, there is a nightlife scene in the UK. Mm-hmm. And all of this just puts pressure on your health and your energy levels. And of course, I am there to get a degree first and foremost. And I would be a fool to pass up the academic opportunities available. So I wanted to make sure that, I was bringing all of myself to my studies. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that the medical students were drinking this pretty disgusting little medical looking sachet of rehydration salts from the UK. I tasted it and it is truly horrible, but it is very effective. And I kind of got curious. I briefly considered going down the medicine track, and biology is not too far removed. So I'm able to, one of the skills you get taught in a science degree is to critique academic literature and to review it very quickly and kind of understand what is true and what is not. And so I basically read up on all of the available hydration literature that there was and understood the mechanism for why this gross little packet of rehydration salts was more effective than a bottle of the leading sports drink brand in the UK, for example. And, from there, at that point, I don't think I'd come up with a really succinct way of explaining it. I moved to the US to work at a startup out west, making software tools for scientists, and still kind of had this itch that I needed to scratch. I was trying all the hydration products in the US now that I was living there, and still couldn't find something that was both effective, not super sugary, and not like gross tasting.
Yeah.
And lastly, something that didn't feel like I was just putting artificial things in my body. And I couldn't find it. I really couldn't. So after many attempts to find it, I started thinking, well, I'm just going to have to make this myself. And so I probably did something rash that I don't recommend, which is I quit my job before I really had much of an idea of how it was going to work out, or much of a plan even. And I drove from the West Coast back to New York, kind of got set up here, and immediately was calling people in the consumer packaged goods world, or CPG as we call it, smart people who knew more than I did, and just said like, hey, I have this idea. This is the kind of product that I want to make. What am I not thinking about? And I'd go on these round the block walking meetings with people, anyone who would give me the time of day, just trying to learn from them. Like, I get the science part. What I don't get is the food and beverage world or supplement world. We are not technically a supplement, but of course, being a powder, a lot of people think that we are.
For sure.
So it was really a learning mission first. And I would recommend that people do the learning part while they still have a job. That was the flaw in my plan. But from there, quickly got into branding and formulation of the product itself, getting to something that tasted good enough. And it was pretty clear from the first or second round of formulation that we were going to be able to make something that tasted unique, differentiated within the market, and like most importantly, good, without adding a ton of sugar, without adding diet sweeteners that would make it taste like a little weird. It's just like a super smooth, subtle, refreshing drink. I will admit the first version that came off the production line was not perfect. It was a little salty tasting and didn't dissolve as fast as I wish it would have. So we've since gone through a couple of revisions of the formula.
Gotcha. How would you, once it was established, how would you evaluate or test effectiveness of your product at this time?
You mean like the functional effectiveness of it?
Yeah, like how could you actually tell the hydration amount and actually affecting your body? How would you be able to test and evaluate when you started out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So hydration is a sort of multivariate problem. There are so many variables in your body that determine your hydration status that it's very difficult to measure. Even in a clinical setting, there are lots of different ways you can measure it. You can measure it with bioelectrical impedance, which is where you put a couple of electrodes on you and measure the resistance between them if you pass current through. You can do specific gravity of urine. You can do osmolality of the blood. There are like so many different ways of doing it and so many different things that affect it. But it's very difficult to get a solid read on how hydrated someone is quickly. What you would see if you go into a hospital, certainly in the UK, is the quickest method is the color of your pee for figuring out how dehydrated you are. So like very, very clear, you have drunk plenty of water and you don't need to drink any more water right now. It's not necessarily something to be worried about, but it can be. Going all the way through to like super dark and you need to seek medical help at that point.
Yeah.
That is the quickest, simplest way to figure out your hydration status. The only other one I would mention is a skin pinch. So some doctors will grab your skin to try and kind of see how much elasticity there is, and that is affected by your hydration too. So with those being the tools, how did I measure the effectiveness of Hydrant in the early days? I did not do it using lab methods. And I didn't do it, well, I guess I probably did do it with the color of my pee and pinching my skin as well. But it was more subjective on how I felt and how customers felt in those early reviews after drinking the product. And we can talk a bit more about like testing into the right message and educating people on when to use it. But the only other thing I would add is I knew that one of the major functional levers you can pull on from the academic literature to make something good at hydrating you is what's called the osmolarity. And that's just the concentration of the solution. And that you can get lab tested. So I sent the product out, got the lab test back, and was like, we are crushing everyone on the market. I tested other products as well. And some products will put the figure on their website. We were just like so far ahead, it wasn't even close. So I knew we had a theoretically very strong product. And then couple that with the really positive reviews that were coming through from customers, we were onto a winner.
Awesome. So at this time, how did you pay for production, research, et cetera? Did you acquire any funding at the start?
Yeah. So I lived pretty frugally when I was in the Bay Area. So I had some of my own savings that I invested. I raised a very small friends and family round and kind of used all of that to invest in the formulation, the branding, and the various early mistakes that I made, which kind of everyone makes.
Yeah.
And then I went to Indiegogo and raised a further, I think it was 17.5 grand was where our Indiegogo netted out. And that was a great experience, just kind of learning how difficult it can be to drive traffic and also to build trust with customers. And my kind of thesis from day one has been that if I'm asking someone to put what I make in their body to ingest it, trust is the number one lever that we have to pull on.
Totally.
So that was a really good early lesson. Like 17.5K is not a gangbusters Indiegogo fundraise by any stretch. Like it was successful, but it was not huge. So it was a bit of a blow, but soldiered on and made that first product. And the next time we brought in funding was when my co-founder joined me in the summer of 2018.
Okay. At this time, did you have one flavor, or what flavors were you offering at the time of launching?
So when we launched, I was still kind of sciencey in my brain, and we had one flavor.
Okay.
I had thought, who cares about flavor? It's all about function. This thing is like the most functional hydration products on the market.
For sure.
There's no way anyone wouldn't buy it. How wrong I was. Very quickly listening to customers, it was like, look, I really love the concept, but I don't love lime. Can you make another flavor? Or it would be, hey, I've been buying this for 3 months. I'm bored of lime. Can you make another flavor? So it was, pretty obvious that we needed to do that. So I think within a year of the original production run, we had launched our second flavor, which was grapefruit. And then, a few months thereafter, we launched our third flavor. And since then, I think we're at 6 flavors of our main SKU. We're at 3 flavors of our caffeinate. Yeah, we have a lot of flavors. I don't need to list them.
Yeah. Awesome. So at this time, how did you begin to advertise Hydrant then? What were the most effective forms of advertising for your company, would you say?
So in the very early days, so after the Indiegogo, production run arrives, got a very simple Shopify website up and running. Honestly, it was a lot of word of mouth. I was also taking boxes of the product into local bodegas around New York City and meeting the owners and just saying, hey, can I put this box on your counter and you can sell these? The packaging was the same shape as Emergency, which is like a staple in New York City bodegas. And I thought, well, if I just can pitch the owner of the bodega that this is something they can sell at a price premium, so $2 a pack instead of one, and that it's likely to help people with hangovers, even though I never directly made that claim. It was just like, oh, people love drinking this after they've been drinking the night before. They get it. And they're like, oh, cool. Yeah, we'll tell people to try drinking it then.
Yeah.
And so that was the other thing. And so I started seeing orders coming in from zip codes around New York City on Shopify. And it was really gratifying to see that there was some traction, but super slow. And it was the end of that summer when I met my co-founder, Jay, who dropped out of business school and invested his tuition money into Hydrant. With that funding, we were able to start running some digital advertising tests. And once you kind of get a little taste of how powerful that is, it's very difficult to want to go back to like dragging a bunch of Hydrant around in a backpack to loads of different bodegas who never call you when it's out of stock.
For sure, yeah.
And checking in. So we kind of very quickly became primarily direct consumer and sort of shut down our bodega side of the business. We were, I don't remember kind of exactly how we were thinking about marketing back then. I know that we had a number of hypotheses for what people would use the product for. So drinking it after drinking alcohol was one use case. Drinking it after sports was another use case. And drinking it first thing in the morning was another use case.
Okay.
I'm sure there were a few others. And that's the beauty of digital marketing, is we were able to test these value propositions to a number of different types of consumers. So we would take, different audiences. Maybe it's like women in their 30s who do yoga and men in their 20s who work in finance, like, you name it. That's the great thing about digital marketing, is you can split your audiences and test different value props against them. And from that, we basically realized, like, we do not want to be anything to do with alcohol. And we don't necessarily want to be a sports drink either. We kind of want to be our own thing, which is this proactive hydration drink that tastes delicious and brings an experience to hydration beyond just drinking plain water, with the added benefit of functionally hydrating you faster.
For sure. So from a customer standpoint, when should a customer use Hydrant, and then like how often as well?
So we ended up taking what at the time felt like a big bet and writing on the packaging, "Wake up with a hydrant first thing in the morning." Okay. I think it was like, I can't remember exactly the copy. It's been a while, but wake up with a rush of morning hydration, something along those lines. And the idea was during the night, I say the idea, the science of it is that during the night you lose water. So you sweat, you lose water when you breathe. And when you sweat, it evaporates, which cools you down, so your body uses less energy. And there have been studies that show at any given body temperature, when you're asleep, you sweat more than when you're awake. And it's thought to be because your body is trying to preserve that energy and get your core temperature down as much as possible. As a result, you don't see any of the sweat that you lost through the night most of the time when you wake up, because it's evaporated. Yeah. And so most people are conditioned, certainly in American society, to think, oh, I wake up and I'm feeling kind of like a little groggy. Maybe I have a headache. I need a coffee, or I need caffeine of some form. And that's the sort of the kind of fallacy that we decided we were going to target. It's like, no, you're probably dehydrated. And if you just drink water, that's great. It's a step in the right direction. But water is absorbed relatively slowly when compared with a product with the right balance of electrolytes and a little bit of sugar. And so we could get you feeling much better, much faster first thing in the morning before you reach for that coffee. And that has been our anchor point from, not from day one, but from way back in late 2018. And we stick by it, really. It's just from reading reviews from customers, you can see that moment in time, that kind of insight that we had, that was a great time for people to drink the product, really stuck for people. And people are having such success with it that we would be foolish to kind of move away from it. That said, we are developing other products to help them at different moments in their day.
Gotcha. So on the scientific side, do you say that Hydrant has some other factors such as a mood boost or energy outside of just hydration?
So as we add these other product lines, we're certainly going to be going more into that. So we have an energy product line, which has caffeine and L-theanine. Caffeine, obviously everyone's familiar with. L-theanine is an amino acid, also found in green tea, that can kind of smooth out the jitteriness of the caffeine. So great for focus. So we wanted to have a product in that regard. But and we're going to continue to develop more product lines along those different functional realms. But the benefits of hydration are very broad, and they're often subtle. So yes, there are absolutely studies that show having a good hydration status leads to a better mood. There are studies that show the incidence of headaches declining when you are well hydrated. There's a lot of different functional benefits of just being well hydrated.
Sure.
We are a beverage. Legally, our product is a beverage. So we don't necessarily lean too hard into the functional element, but hydration as a concept has been shown time and time again in studies, like real peer-reviewed academic journals, to have all kinds of benefits to our health and performance. And really, that's what we're trying to support. We're trying to get people to wake up to the fact that they're probably dehydrated. When you're hungry, you're probably dehydrated.
For sure.
Like tired, groggy, probably dehydrated. And to make that first instinct not be caffeine or food or a nap, but drink water. Or even better, drink Hydrant, because we're going to make you feel that effect faster.
Gotcha. So looking at Hydrant today, what would you say is your top seller, flavor-wise?
So blood orange is killer for us. Okay. We recently launched a number of new flavors, but it's too early to say if they're going to be the best sellers. But blood orange is our kind of, it was the third flavor we launched. It is very delicious and unique. Not that the other flavors aren't unique, but it's so true to blood orange, the fruit. And I think it tastes a little bit sweeter maybe than our original flavors. So that is definitely the number one.
Okay. What would you say separates Hydrant from your competitors also in this field?
Yeah. So, I mean, we view our competitors really as being like a big sports drink. So like the massive sports drink brands that are selling ready to drink products across the country in cases at large supermarket chains, at gas stations in like single bottle form. We think that is really where the opportunity lies. The main incumbent there has like 70% market share or somewhere thereabouts. And as far as I'm concerned, the sky is the limit as to eroding that market share and getting people drinking a lower sugar, less artificial color, flavors, sweeteners product that is truly functional, and building it into their routine. The other thing is, a lot of our customers are drinking this product at home, where, they have a cup, they have a bottle available, and it's not a case of like a 30 pack is the unit we sell on our website.
Okay.
You can have a 30 pack in your cupboard and it really doesn't take up more space than a cereal box.
For sure.
But if you had a case of 30 sports drinks, it would be taking up a lot of space.
For sure.
So, there's a number of benefits there. In terms of like the differentiating factors, I'll do a quick comparison. So sugar is probably the main one. Although of course there are now sugar-free sports drinks that use diet sweeteners. Our core hydration product is a balance of electrolytes more similar to that of your blood versus your sweat. Where a sports drink is trying to be like your sweat, we're trying to have a ratio of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and zinc that is more like your blood. Okay. And all of this is pulled straight from the academic literature behind a concept called oral rehydration solutions, ORS, which has been around since the late 1970s. So, I always think of it as we're standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us and leveraging that research to our benefit.
Gotcha.
The other piece, so we've talked about sugar, we've talked about electrolyte balance. The last thing is that osmolarity piece, which I mentioned earlier, having a really low osmolarity. Now, that osmolarity goes up, the more sugar you have. So we're kind of naturally set up to have a better osmolarity than most traditional sports drinks that are carb based. So that's the main thing. I mean, look, and that's just from a functional standpoint. From a taste standpoint, it's really hard to describe. Like, we're less sweet. I think that's where the market is going, and that's really how we want to be. We're not trying to just overly sweeten everything to remind you of sodas from back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
There's no nostalgia needed. I think America is getting used to a less sweet flavor profile. Not everyone likes the diet sweeteners. Some are better than others. And we really went for real fruit juice powder in every single product, which is not something you'll find in any of the powdered products that are direct competitors of ours. They're all using flavor systems that don't use the real juice. And by using real juice, it's expensive, but it gives you this like subtle but real fruit taste that makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And just kind of adds to the whole refreshment. There's no lingering aftertastes. So it's a flavor and a function difference.
For sure.
I hope I haven't gone on too long on that answer.
No, that's perfect. So for the listeners out there, where can Hydrant be found?
So, I mean, we have been primarily an e-commerce business to date at drinkhydrant.com. We also are available on Amazon, but the selection of products available is not as broad as what's on our website. We've been very busy through the summer launching new flavors, new product lines, including an hydration plus immunity product line. We're in Whole Foods in the Northeast, and we are launching Walmart nationwide as of this week.
Wow.
So we'll be available
Congrats.
in many local Walmarts across the country.
Awesome. So I like to wrap up each episode with this. If you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, what would that be? Maybe something you've learned or regret, just anything.
Yeah, so I have a go-to here. I think it may be a bit of a cliche at this point, but I can't stress it enough. And I used to read a lot of business books, and it's always in there. And I always think, yeah, I would never do that, but I did. It is taking too long to ship product. And what I mean by that is being a perfectionist. So the very specific example here is when we were formulating version 1 of Hydrant, I spent probably 8 months trying to get it to perfect. 8 months is an insane amount of time to spend on a relatively simple electrolyte drink mix product. And I kept trying to get to perfect without getting a ton of people to taste the product. As soon as we launched it and had random people who I'd never met across the country tasting it, giving feedback, suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of see what they're talking about here. Or, oh, there's a pattern in this feedback. I'm going to make this tweak to the product. They wouldn't have hated it if I had launched it after 4 months, for example, so half the time, and I would have still made the changes. So I wasted, at least 4 months in spending that long formulating. And it's just because I was scared to launch something that wasn't perfect. But of course, what I launched was not perfect anyway. So my advice would be, don't wait for perfect. If you feel like you're 70% of the way there, pull the trigger.
For sure. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Hydrant at drinkhydrant.com.
Thanks, Cameron.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.